The political deadlock that began back in 2019 in Israel is taking its toll on the economy. Israel has had 2 failed elections since that time, and for the first time ever, had 3 elections in the span of 1 year. Hello, I'm Mariam Mazarcher, and this is Inside Israel. So what does this all mean for Israel? Well, for one thing, the impact of the stalemate is being felt across Israel.
Israel grinds to halt after almost 1 year without a regime and almost 2 failed elections, pending a third one. The political deadlock in Israel is taking its toll on the economy, as the current caretaker cabinet is limited in its ability to enact economic policies. The repercussions are significant too. The fiscal budget deficit in Israel is growing. The Bank of Israel says it could now reach 4.6% of gross domestic product. The problem? In the world of economics, this is a big number. In fact, the Israeli Central Bank believes that this number will make the national debt surge to 75% of GDP by 2025. The International Monetary Fund has already lowered its forecast for Israel's economy this year. Israel's 2020 budget is unlikely to be approved until at least mid-2020. The current caretaker regime is limited in its ability to enact economic policies. To top it all off, the next election is set to cost Israel nearly $200 million. In Tel Aviv, Israel's economic hub, funds for multi-year projects are being paid out 1 month at a time, and funding for the metro has been stalled. Mayors say that they cannot get new bus routes approved. Local licenses for businesses and general bureaucracies have either stalled the work or postponed it. Israel is almost a year into an acute butter shortage that has caused the stable to disappear from supermarket shelves. This is a result of the wider political deadlock. Why? Well, Israeli companies have started exporting the products to the EU because they make more over there, while emptying local markets. The lack of bureaucracy has practically nullified any oversight over supply and the amounts that can be exported abroad.
Israeli journalist and author Gideon Levy joins us from Tel Aviv. Hello, Mr. Levy, and welcome to the show. Now, Mr. Levy, here's my first question. What are the repercussions of the over 1 year long political deadlock in Israel?
It does affect, but less than it seems from the outside, because finally everything is functioning. It has an effect in terms of changes. You cannot do any changes. You don't have a new budget. You can't make many nominations. You can't take really major political measures, which Israel is really needing. All this is really standstill. It's really frozen. Israel is in a certain frozen situation, but you don't feel it in daily life. Not yet, no.
Well, the Israeli citizens are frustrated with the political stalemate. Who should be held responsible for that, do you think?
Many Israelis are very frustrated with this situation, and above all, they fed up with politicians, almost with all politicians, because they understand that the price of this deadlock is so unnecessary. It's also economical price. All those elections cost a lot of money. This money could be spent on hospitals, on education, on so many more important things. So the main spirit is now of really feeding up with all the politicians, not only with Netanyahu, with everyone, feeding up with the political system, with the parties. But by the end of the day, the individual can do very little to change it.
Well, speaking about the mistrust in Israeli politicians, will Israeli citizens be able to forgive the politicians for all of this?
In all polls, it shows that the citizens of Israel do not trust the politicians. By the way, they don't trust us, the journalists, either. And it's always the lowest in trust, politicians and journalists. But in the same time, a statesman like Netanyahu gains in one part of Israel, not in all Israel, but in one part of Israel, he is perceived as a magician, as a great hero, and they forgive him for anything. So the answer cannot be with one dimension. Most of the Israelis say, no, we don't trust Israeli politicians. On the other hand, when it comes to elections, they choose themselves their heroes, and all of a sudden they believe in them. So I cannot give you a black and white answer. The answer is both. They do trust them and they don't trust them.
Now, what does the future hold? I mean, will there be any difference in terms of the political deadlock in the next elections?
No, unfortunately, it's not different. We are facing exactly the same situation, but maybe this time either the voters or the politicians will realize that this cannot last forever, and either the voters will change their votes or the politicians will decide that they break this deadlock. And I truly believe that this time, I mean, because it's really too much, Israel is totally paralyzed, there is no acting government, and this cannot go like this forever. Someone will have to make a compromise and create a government.
Well, thank you, Mr. Levy. Israeli journalist and author Gideon Levy from Tel Aviv, Israel. On the streets of the northern Israeli city of Haifa, we asked the Israelis several questions. We started out with this one. Has the political deadlock impacted you?
תראי, המצב הפוליטי בעצם, אם אני מסתכל על כל מה שקורה בארץ, יושבים להם שרים, חברי כנסת, שכולם דואגים רק לכיסאות שלהם. לא מעניין אותם מהעם. לא מעניין אותם, יש עם מרות שאין לו מה לאכול, ואף אחד לא מסתכל. מבטיחים, כולם לפני הבחירות מבטיחים. הרים וגבעות, ובסופו של דבר אין שום דבר. בסוף הוא דואג לכיסא שלו ולאנשים שלו.
אני עצמאית, ואני עובדת גם מול משרדים שמקבלים תקציבים מהממשלה הלא קיימת שלנו. וזה גורם לעיכובים, וזה גורם לבירוקרטיה וסחבת של תשלומים, ומן הסתם זה משפיע גם על המצב של התזרים של העסק שלי.
להקשיב לעם, העם ממש צועק שתפסיקו עם הפירוד הזה, תפסיקו עם חוסר האחריות, עם הילדותיות הזאת, ויש יש מגמות שונות, יש דעות שונות, אבל יחד עם זה גם יש דאגה על החיבור ועל לעבוד ביחד, כי סך הכל כל הפירוד הזה רק מחליש את כולם.
נכון. אתה חושב שתהיו עוד בחירות אחרי בחירות של מרץ?
אני לא אתפלא. אני לא אתפלא.
המצב הפוליטי הקיים כרגע לא משפיע עליי במיוחד. אני מניחה שאני אולי לאחר בחירות, שדברים יסתדרו יותר ויהיו יותר יציבים במדינה, אני אולי ארגיש אותו לטובה או לרעה. יחד עם זאת, יש גם דברים שהם לאורך זמן, הם ישתפרו גם. כמו מחיר למשתכן, שזה דבר, אני חושבת שזה דבר מאוד מאוד חשוב. וטוב, החשמל עלה קצת לאחרונה, אז לא מסתדר כל כך בכלכלה, אז אפשר לומר שזה משפיע, כן. אבל לא בצורה ממש, איך אומרים, דרסטית, לא בצורה קיצונית.
בחירות, כי הארץ, העם הזה מפולג. זה אלא אם מי שצריך לזוז הצידה, ואז יכולים להגיע להסכם. אחרת, לדעתי, יהיה עוד הרבה בחירות. זה לא עוד אחד ועוד אחד, זה יהיה בלי סוף.
אני מאוד מקווה שלא. מצד שני, כמו שזה נראה כרגע, שום דבר לא באמת ישתנה. וזה מאוד עצוב לי.
אני לא חושבת שיהיו עוד בחירות, כי אז זה כבר... לא, כי עכשיו זה לא פחות מזה, אבל זה נראה לי שלא יהיו.
And those were the mixed reactions from Israelis on the topic. There's still a lot more to discuss, so don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after the break. So many questions still linger. Questions like, how did Israel get away with prioritizing politics over reforms? Or more crucially, how much will this cost Israel over the short and the long term? And who will ultimately be blamed for it? This next case study answers these questions and more.
The problem is that in Israel we have two big parties. Every one of these parties needs small parties in order to have a majority in the parliament. The problem is that the two bodies of parties that are considerable are on the right of the political map and on the left of the political map, in particular with the Arab Party, which has gained significance. So the problem of the deadlock is that if you have the Arab Party, then the extreme right wing would not join the parliament, and similarly. So the difficulty is in putting these things together, and so we have two big blocks, but none of them has enough for a majority. Well, the impacts are twofold. One is in terms of economics, because there's no parliament, there's no body that actually makes new laws. There's nobody that appoints serious office makers in the bureaucracy. So people are appointed basically on a very arbitrary consideration. And finally, we're talking about a huge expense in the sense of running these elections. Okay, in terms of the economy, the impact is negative in the sense that because you don't have a parliament, you cannot pass a budget. And so the solution, the mechanism to solve the situation is that we use last year's budgets. But the problem is that as the population grows, there are bigger budgetary needs than are covered by last year's budget, so very many budgets are not sufficient for the current need. Well, the problem is who the authorities are, because we have currently a transitional government, but the transitional government, because it's only a temporary government, does not really have the authority, or it has the authority but not the moral authority to pass significant laws, and the parliament is not active. So this means that they cannot actually pass significant laws to take care of the current situation. The problem is that many budgets, particularly for old people, for children who need help in terms of development or things of the sort, so these budgets that normally would be extended or added, these budgets are basically frozen. So as a result, you can see quite a few programs that are frozen and population that do not receive the social conditions that they were expecting to get. Well, I think that the Israeli public is becoming quite cynical. Many people vote for parties that they are not really excited about, only because they want to maintain the government or replace the government, even though they do it out of desperation, because they see that there's no significant leadership in the future. Netanyahu, who was very effective in the beginning, over the time he became exhausted. And the Netanyahu that we have today is exhausted, is not effective.
Experts and analysts from inside and outside Israel pointed out to what they call underlying issues. They believe that the political deadlock Israel witnessed for a year highlighted chronic problems that Israel has tried to whitewash since its inception into the Western Asia region in 1948. Let's take a look.
Economists believe that the shortages illustrates fundamental weakness in Israel's politics and economy. Israel has these very strong roots of socialism, and price controls are very popular, even though they don't really work. The political deadlock has revealed underlying issues in Israel's economy. What are the underlying issues? Slow job creation. Decade-old right-wing coalition has delayed tackling big fundamental issues to modernize the economy. Moreover, productivity and workforce participation have been dragged down, and an old and deteriorating health and transportation infrastructure, a chronic housing crisis, and Israel has the highest costs of living among others in the OECD. With the political deadlock, actions by non-profit organizations and other organizations that are tasked with increasing the workforce, for example, cannot do their jobs because funding has dried up. Political maneuvering for Israeli officials is increasingly taking priority over long-term planning as a period of electoral paralysis pushes off crucial investments and reforms. The national debt load went up last year and is going up even more this year, with the cabinet now unable to increase taxes or cut spending. The IMF has warned that the political statement could act as a constraint on Tel Aviv's ability to use fiscal policy to cushion shocks to the economy. Israelis are not happy about the political deadlock and its implications either.
I think this is the worst thing for Israel right now. We are in a bad situation economically by means of our foreign relations, by the means of our health system. And the only thing we need now is a stable government that will handle these issues.
I feel like it's one person against the whole country, trying to block some sort of government being built up. But then again, you can blame the other heads of coalitions, the heads of parties as well, for not being able to complete as well. It's a big problem that we're stuck in nowadays, and we'll see. Hopefully it will fix up soon, but I don't see anything really happening, changing.
Frustrating to have a third election, to think that we can't come to some sort of agreement as to how the country should move forward. And it just feels, in some ways, a little bit hopeless that there should ever be a peace process. I don't know who's the answer. I wish I had a magic ball to say, like, this is gonna solve all of the issues.
We've been in election mode since December of 2018. That means that Netanyahu will complete a year and a half as prime minister of a caretaker government that cannot make major decisions, neither in appointments, nor in legislation, or in any level of national decision making.
Joshua Tartakovsky, Israeli-American author and independent journalist, joins us from Istanbul. Glad to have you with us, Mr. Tartakovsky. Now, Israel finds itself amidst a third election since 2019. What is different this time around?
What is so interesting about the third elections that Israel finds itself in this time is that a sitting prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is in fact rallying the country, rallying huge amounts of the population against the justice system of the country. So half of the population is deeply distrustful of the Israeli justice system because it's been delegitimized by the prime minister. On the other hand, there's a very large segment of the population, which is center, maybe a little bit left, but more like, it would be fair to call them the center. And they are deeply, they have deep animosity towards Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they dislike him to such a degree that they are unwilling to have him lead the government under any kind of circumstance. So the level of animosity between the different parties is larger than ever before. The demands of the small parties is larger than ever before, even though there's a severe deficit. And the country is deeply divided more than ever before without any party forming a clear majority.
Now, it seems like Israel will run into the same problems it ran into in the two previous failed elections. Can Netanyahu even come up with a coalition after being indicted of criminal charges?
First, there's a legal question, which is still unsettled, whether a prime minister who is being indicted of criminal charges could in fact form a coalition. And this is an issue which is likely to be battled in court for a while, or could be battled in court. However, it is unlikely that the blue and white party will allow Netanyahu to run first as a sitting prime minister, because Yair Lapid, who wanted to run in a rotation with Benny Gantz, both of them from the blue and white party, he just agreed to allow Benny Gantz to run as the number one without any kind of rotation. But he did that because he does not want Benjamin Netanyahu to be the first one to run. So the blue and white party is unlikely to accept allowing Bibi to go first. On the other hand, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not budge, and he's unlikely to step from his position because not only because he wants to reach a better plea bargain, as some Western papers, in my opinion, wrongly stated, but also because he believes that he's unjustly being prosecuted by the justice system and that he deserves and is the only leader who can run Israel, and he deserves to be the prime minister, and he's entitled to, and that is his position from which he's unlikely to budge. So he's not going to give up his claim to run the country first, and he's deeply worried about any scenario where he will not have absolute control.
Now, let me get your opinion on this. Is there going to be a fourth election, or will this third one succeed?
There's every reason why there will actually be a fourth election, because nothing qualitatively is likely to change. Each camp is deeply entrenched in its position, and each side is unwilling to budge. So what we're likely to see for the foreseeable future is no budget, no new budget, no funding for social programs. Hospitals are crowded and educational institutions are suffering from lack of funds, and there's a lack of doctors. All this is likely to increase. And prices are likely to rise because Finance Minister Kahlon recently said he will retire. So in fact, what we're likely to see is, while actually many Israelis are probably fed up and they don't want to vote again, they are tired of the scene where they have to go to the elections every few months. They will have to vote because their economic situation is likely to deteriorate. And that's why we're likely to see ongoing entrenchment of the different parties without a compromise being reached, and lack of a clear budget, a lack of a government plan, and also a lack of a 5-year defense budget.
Now, what makes the political situation in Israel so unique? I mean, why haven't the political groups formed a coalition or even come to an understanding?
What is unique about the current situation Israel is in is that each side of the various parties is becoming even more deeply entrenched in its position, even more deeply distrustful of the other side, and even less willing to compromise or reach any kind of mutual understanding. And also, there isn't one clear villain. It's a matter of multiple villains, with each side blaming the other. So, half of the population deeply hates Benjamin Netanyahu, and the other half believes he's a victim of an unjust and a far-left justice system. So that's why Israel is in the current mess that it's in, and this is unlikely to change.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Tartakovsky. That was Joshua Tartakovsky, Israeli-American author and independent journalist from Istanbul. It's now time to take a look at the stories making the news in Israel. Haaretz. New math initiative being undertaken is heightening disparities between right-wing and center and between Arabs and Jews. Jerusalem Post. Sudanese asylum seekers in Israel condemned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's efforts to normalize Israel's diplomatic relations with the new military leader of Sudan, as Tel Aviv normalizes ties with Sudanese general and de facto leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The Times of Israel. Policeman who killed Ethiopian-Israeli teen back in 2019 is finally charged with negligent homicide. The Times of Israel. Thousands of files stored on the cell phone of the former head of the Israeli Bar Association have reportedly been leaked, fueling worries that sensitive data that could be used to blackmail public officials is now in the hands of malicious actors. Ynet. 14 Israelis among passengers quarantined on coronavirus hit ship off Japan. And that ends this edition of Inside Israel. Let's hear what you have to say about this. You can find this episode and more at presstv.com. There, you can leave us your comments too. Until next time.